freedom of speech is a bit topical lately because, obviously because of the certain recent narratives and because of alternative social medias coming out to combat the censorship and whatnot. And, kind of some of the news of the day is that this new one, Trump Social, basically, is going to be just as bad, if not worse, than Twitter. It's just going to be different censorship instead of freedom of speech. And so far, the only alternative platform that actually looks reasonable, as far as standard social media goes, is Gab, and we haven't quite got there yet. Now, I will say this: I just recently took another look at Gab. I had looked at them over a year ago, and their site, their interface was so broken and so unusable that I just didn't think much about it. But going back, it actually looks a little bit better. And now here's one of the cool things. Now, so I would still prefer a social media that does allow at least, Playboy-esque, tasteful nudity. I'm okay with not allowing porn on the site, but I think we need to get past this idea that nudity is pornography, because it's not, and I think that is something that is holding us back. But the fact that you have somebody who's a pretty hardcore Christian, I can't remember the guy's name that runs Gab, but somebody who is a pretty hardcore Christian is still saying, no, we need this freedom of speech. We need a place that allows people, to express their full freedom, which basically means that if it's legal, then you're allowed to express it. And I think that's actually pretty important. Personally, I'm not even that worried about legal. I'm more worried about moral and ethical ramifications. Now, of course, technically speaking, right, they don't allow doxing. And some people will say, well, doxing is not technically illegal. And sure, but generally speaking, doxing is kind of right up there with, it's maybe not quite violence, but it starts becoming a coercive tactic to get people to shut up, because we're going to publish all of your contact information and get people to flood you with harassment. Harassment does start bordering on, actual violence. And so I don't have a problem with, banning doxing. I think that's pretty reasonable. So I'm kind of excited to see what Gab is doing. I haven't really set up an account with them yet. We'll get there though. As far as other video platforms, obviously like YouTube is where the audience is, so that's kind of where we're doing this for the time being. I am interested in what Rumble and Odyssey are doing. I think Locals, that is attached to Rumble, is a reasonable platform for membership, subscriber kind of things. I do think that is reasonable. I kind of agree with Tim Pool that I think that their 10% fee is a little hefty, but I don't understand how to make alternatives work yet. I'm not really a tech guy. Anyway, the big thing that I just wanted to say here is more than anything is just like freedom of speech is important, right? And there is a reason that the First Amendment was written the way that it was written, because people were tired of the government coming in and saying, you must support this narrative, you cannot speak against the authorities this way. And the fact is that in order to hold people in positions of power accountable, you need to have freedom of speech. And in order to hold each other accountable, you need to have freedom of speech. I love the way that Jordan Peterson says it, right? Just put everything out there, because when you take the blankets off, when you take things out of the dark corners and you just put everything out there, then bad, ridiculous, harmful ideas can be properly mocked and ridiculed and taken down. through the market, through the public space and the public interaction, much, much better than it can be by sequestering it away into the dark corners and creating a free speech black market, which can create pockets of extremism, because when you allow things to kind of isolate and cultivate away from, just away from open daylight, what you end up is with these very insular chambers of people who create additional extremism, because things start acting like a superorganism at some point, and the groupthink grows and builds. I tell you, this cat meowing at the door, he does not like closed doors. It's hard to record a video in peace. What do you think? In other news, the other night Elizabeth and I were walking the dog, and she was opining about her work situation, and I just kind of jokingly said to her, I said, "Why don't you become the next Joe Rogan and start a podcast?" And she's like, "I don't have anything to talk about. I don't like talking. Who would I talk to? I don't know people." And I said, "Hey, Joe Rogan started somewhere too. He didn't know everybody to start with." And funny part is, I don't even really like Joe. But I think he speaks out of turn way too much, but that's another story. And then she goes, "Well, why don't you start a podcast?" And then she's like, "Why don't you start a podcast?" And I'm like, well, martial arts and training, I mean, unless you're going over the science, doesn't really make for a good podcast. And there's already people much smarter than me doing those podcasts. I don't think that I should be doing one that way. And my other channel, this channel, is really just for random stuff. I mean, I literally just say arts and philosophy because it's the variety of skills and creativity that I like to pursue other than training, and talking about philosophical matters. I try to avoid necessarily partisan politics, but talking about the philosophical stuff. Now, the other side of it too is, what even makes a podcast? I mean, what makes something qualify as a podcast? Is it just long form content opining, or is it an interview show? I'm not set up to do interviews. I don't have the technology, the equipment to do it. And I don't know that I'm interested in setting down rigid schedules, especially because I have a normal brick and mortar business as well. And that would make my time frame for being able to do interviews extremely limited. Is having a podcast just doing long form content and conversations? I mean, I can do that by myself, but then how is that any different than what we're doing here, other than sitting down for an hour or two to do it? So I don't know that a podcast is in the cards, but I'm not necessarily opposed. I just don't have the capacity to do that kind of stuff yet. So I don't know. And I mean, right now, as of recording this video, we have 4 subscribers. So it's a long way off anyway. Like I said a couple of years ago, I'm not doing this to become YouTube famous or anything. This is just a way for me to kind of brain dump all of the other stuff outside of training into something. And because I'm a talker, that's what I do. So I will leave you guys with this, and I will talk to you guys later. Good journey.
Chocolate-covered laser discs, flashing like a dagger in the night.